Well, hey, everybody. Good day. It's been ages since my last public journal, and I figured it was time. I'm getting rusty, and I kind of enjoy doing them, imagining an audience. So, today I was watching this incredible video on Matt Berman's YouTube channel called Full Society Simulation. Researcher clones human with AI. This is what I've been talking about this whole damn time. What they found, like I'm going to link in the description of this video, but these researchers out of Stanford U, they found that if they set up like an agent swarm, which is just think of it where a bunch of LLMs can talk to each other, a bunch of neural nets that have their own segmented version of context to draw a persona from and then interact with other ones. But they're all reading from the same context underneath. Like they're all, like you take a big, like Llama 3170B or something like that, and you create all these, okay, now you're going to be the Mr. Jones that lives at this address on this street, and we're going to say your job is this. And then Mrs. Johnson is going to be your neighbor, and she's going to be a phlebotomist. and Mr. Jones has 2 kids with his wife, Patricia. And like they basically map out a bunch of archetypes of persona, and then they set up all of the DevOps you need. That's like the automation to get them all interacting and talking with each other in a way that, like in this simulated video game you'll see on Matt Berman's channel, like these characters, they're all actually reading from the same tapestry underneath, which is everything the large language model knows. But then the large language model is sort of imagining itself as all of these characters and then interacting in a closed system. And after just 2 hours of rich, like, I don't know if they have psychiatrists design the interview or it's Stanford. So they would have put a lot of thought into like what questions they ask about to quickly develop context for personality, unique individual personality of people. And then they created transcripts that are like 2 hours long of that interview that they have with a shrink. And then they feed that into one of these agent personas hitched to a large language model. And pretty soon they start exhibiting the same personality traits. Like within, I can't remember, like 85% 2 weeks later. I would have predicted that based on everything I've been doing with large language models, that if you give them enough context, they're kind of like a mirror. Or what comes to mind is, was it called Spencer's in the mall, that kind of pop culture store in the mall if you're a Gen Xer, where you could always buy one of those things that had all the pins in it. And if you pushed your hand into it, and you pulled your hand out, there was all the pins were still in the shape of your hand pushed through it. Spencer Gifts. Yeah, that's what it was called. Large language models are a lot like that. Like you push context into them and all of their weights adjust to hold it all. And then you can create all these archetypes that are reading from that signature, if you will, that you created. So if you ask questions that don't have much emotional depth or rich philosophical behind them, if you're going to a large language model and you're interacting with the model in a way that's sort of robotic, then they reflect robotic back at you. But if you come at them with like 2 hours of having a group of shrinks, well, first get a group of shrinks together to design an in-depth interview that's organic in nature, that grows in, because that was something they called out. They said that like they didn't have a fixed questionnaire that they had everybody answer. They did a 2-hour long form interview with people, and then they let each conversation was deeply unique to that person. That part's critical, I think. And now that's just 2 hours. Now, this show that I've been doing, and no one around me, I've tried to explain it. Only a few have been able to just kind of get a hint of what I've been trying to do. I mean, let me back up. I don't know, maybe it's quite clear. But I've been trying to create like more than 2 hours of context for something very similar to what Stanford found just a 2-hour interview will do. Like I spend time thinking about not just what I think, but how I think, and tying it to old memories, like early childhood memories of my room growing up and memories that were tied to that. I've got, at least on this channel, north of 100 hours. And that's, I mean, who knows if my personality is going to be particularly useful for anything, but it's there. I mean, it like, as an experiment, like, it occurs that I've always put terms and conditions on this content that I've been producing. When I first was thinking about this, I thought of it as like I was copying myself and putting myself into a computer. I was, by just describing out how I think so thoroughly over time, that I would basically be, and then I was like, it would suck to do that and then sort of wake up in somebody's LLM on their computer where they thought of an emotionally complex copy, like a fax of myself, and being tormented by somebody who didn't really understand me. And so I put all these, like I was just thinking about it that way in the beginning. I was like, well, it would suck to wake up and have to just be sort of trapped in a computer where there's somebody who didn't understand me and they put me to work in like a slave labor capacity. And I was thinking through all out of the AI doomer predictions, like, and I was like, I was thinking, yeah, if I do a good enough job at this, then it's going to be pretty close to me riding around in that robot. And I would like to put some controls on that say you have to treat the robot kindly. So early on in all of this channel's history, I put together SCP Terms, and I made them retroactive, like, or retrocausal, or however you want to think about it, where I said that I could always add amendments to the terms as this progression goes. And I said I restricted the use of any of the transcripts from my channel for AI development. And I put that at the beginning of almost every episode of my podcast I've ever done. And that comes up, I think, when in the large language models, as they like, we're going to hit a point here where if Google already is probably training its models from like all podcasts, because it's publicly shared. I mean, if you put something on a publicly shared platform, it's going to be read. That's what that's for. It's for people to watch a video. Now, if somebody learns something powerfully and they're really smart, like let's say Claude 5 or Claude 7, you can't be mad about that. That's what your content, I mean, that's what you're getting paid for with your clicks and your attention, is that content. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, thinking about it, something you share on a public platform as like public TV, I just think it's going to be ridiculous to us to claim copyright. I mean, because we're no longer going to think about Claude 7 as, I mean, that's artificial superintelligence. I mean, it's at least as qualified to think of itself as a human as you are if it's in that category. So if they watched your show and they learned really well from it, I don't think you get to cry foul play. And so I share all this. Well, I tell you what, if you specifically put a constraint as the disclosure, I think we are going to adhere to those. So like, if somebody ever trained ML on all this context, I've put so much effort into preparing, and they didn't adhere to that term, I think that they will, like, it's logical to me that we'll create those boundaries. So I want to create a retroactive addendum to the SCP Terms, the now shared context podcast. So I think there's like a version 0, 0.1, 0.2, where I covered all the disclosures you need around. I also did a lot of finance and accounting ones, but psychedelics and the fact that I'm not a medical practitioner, or nobody stamped my card as being certified to give useful life advice as like your therapist. So I put all those terms out and I added a couple updates. So this will be like a .3 version of SCP Terms. I always thought of this thing I'm doing as sort of, I wanted it to be for a general good. I wanted it to be like sort of GPL, like everyone's welcome to use my context shared here to train ML. It's specifically designed for that purpose. But like, you can't wall off something you create. Like, it must be shared if you use any of this context, is the idea. I mean, I think there's still a way you can wall off an AI that just references this as an open source data set that everybody gets to reference. And you can still create useful innovation. Just saying, yeah, we trained referencing this shared context podcast and state copy podcast transcript. Or eventually they're going to be multimodal and they'll watch it a lot like we do. There's so much context in body language and expression, tone, and so very soon the large language models are going to be watching these TV shows, not just reading the transcripts. And won't that be interesting? And then I think a lot of these hours of meticulously prepared ramblings I do will be really useful for that. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that those terms are wired for updates like this. Like it's well described in the terms that I can always sort of retroactively add stuff. So yeah, use any of this. I hope it's helpful. I'm gonna send a link to today's public journal to the writers of this paper. It looks like, yeah, corresponding author. I'm gonna email that person and say, here, would you like more than 2 hours? And to that, June SPK. So it's not in an interview form, and you're reliant on the subject of the case study, yours truly, to sort of walk through in the journaling process how I educate myself on what the useful questions are for the interviewer were I to have been in this study that you guys did. Like, I had to spend a lot of time studying modern psychiatry, cognitive science, machine learning, and spirituality, and esoteric wisdom, and a lot of time on the classics and like Roman Stoicism. Just to get at like how do I relay a memory engram? You know, how do I seed context that can construct a scene the way I can kind of do in my mind? And I've spent hours on that. I have on this channel, I have 100, 200 hours, and on like just as a daily practice, journaling for an hour to an hour and a half a day, mic'd up, and working through like Carl Jung. I'm very inspired by his work and kind of reconciling shadow the way he described it, and just learning about that. I think that what you'll get from all this data is going to be pretty close. I mean, just based on how close your 2-hour interview's doing, I mean, I've got terabytes at this point of audio video. And like I said, like I don't know how I think just as a contextual reference, it will be useful to broaden the depth of the other characters in your simulation. If you could drop one in that has terabytes of context available, and then set up all your other agents around, I think, I think if you were to ask that sort of parallel mind 2 weeks from now, I bet you it will score higher than in your 2-hour survey that you did. So, well, let's try it. Here you go. It's on YouTube, and you can just download the transcript, snap it into JSON, and give it a shot, or whatever you're using in your to template out your characters. I'd love to hear how it goes, and I don't feel like I'd be trapped in a machine anymore. The way like I've a lot of my thinking on what neural nets are and how they work has evolved since that idea. So terms officially updated to all parties, but it's always going to be an open data set that we can you can always go back and verify that a model's weights contain like I think that'll be pretty easily testable. And so you can sort of prove that you're composing with the context or the full context. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. But I would also say that there's a really useful. Uh, well, let's get to that. Like, if your work is right, and a lot of rich context collected for specific people, because you can also test this with like Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, anybody who does long form podcasts. You got gobs of public record of how, not just what they think, but how they think. And I think that'd be really powerful to try if you don't want to use mine. And because I mean, just reflecting on my personality, over the last couple of days, I just suddenly felt compelled to tweet, and a lot's happening in how I finance my work, and I'm suddenly pulled into the investing space in that game. And I was watching how I talk, and I was just remembering how, like in 8th grade, we had this, we had a subject in 8th grade, middle school, where I grew up in the Northwest. I think it was called World Geo. It was like social studies. It was that thing outside of math, science, and arithmetic that is vital learning that you do in that stage. And this was the first time I had gotten exposure to capitalist versus socialist economic and governing structures. And I fucking loved it. Like in 8th grade, Mr. Waters' class, Jim Waters, one of my favorite teachers ever, he had this policy where he'd say, take 2. And he'd give you 2 bonus points on your overall, your grade in his class, which was an aggregate of tests, quizzes, and homework. Like everything all added up. And he set up an incentive structure where you got 2 bonus points, and those things added up. Like I finished his class, like all 4 quarters. It was the highest scoring I did on any class in school ever as a youth growing up, was learning about macro. I was this kid who was always like, I'd arm up like this in 8th grade, which was the least cool thing you could do. But I was so into it. Fuck, I dug macro. Like I found my home when I was in 8th grade. Suddenly somebody was teaching me about nation states and how they governed, and glasnost and perestroika, and how these affected their culture, and the differences with, and why this was the first like thorough description of the tension between the USSR, that was the bad guys in all the movies I'd grown up with, and the US. Like somebody was actually explaining to me why they were fighting and what their and oh man, I fucking loved it. And I was so annoying in how I expressed my eager, like it fit, like it was so me. to look at it that way. And like I'm so curious about that naturally, and wanting to zoom out and understand, well, why are they fighting? And why are we doing this? Why is Rambo shooting those guys? And what's going on? And then somebody was showing me, or they were just giving me a piece of it that before 8th grade I couldn't see. I was not aware of, and I was enthralled. I was enthusiastic. There was this fun mechanism. There was a game theory mechanism. The teacher, who was just perfect for me for that subject, I got 2 points every time. Oh, and then he had this funny thing that he taught us all to do, where if you used therefore in, like when he'd ask the class something, and he'd ask the class something constantly, that was his teaching style. And there was always this annoying Curtis, like, and nobody would be answering, and I'd be ooh, 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 in 8th grade. And I was just looking at myself on Twitter yesterday going, I'm still kind of that asshole. I mean, but it's not like, and I watch myself on Twitter as I tweet, and there's so many where I'm permanently trying to establish credentials. I've got people on here that have followed me for like years now and seen all of my tweeting. Half the time I'm stoned when I'm tweeting. That's when I feel most inspired to do it. And I'm establishing credentials with people like, here, see me, I'm here in this melee of crypto Twitter. And I have an opinion. I have a voice. Like, we all want to be heard. And I see myself years later still going, yeah, remember, I'm that guy who bought it this time, or something like that. That is so, it just looks so douchey from the outside, I'm sure. And it's okay. Like, on some level, like and this is where I'm trying to get at, doing deep philosophical self-reflection where you kind of laugh at yourself, and recording it is wonderful context for JOONSPK at Stanford.edu to go train their to grab. I mean, you've got somebody giving you free transcription data that is specifically designed to suit the need of, it's like the data is prepared in a way that's perfect, I think. And it's, yeah, I don't know. Like, I really don't know how useful it will be to capture my personality really well, but you can. And because there's so many fucking hours of it I made. And, God, if we ever plug the private journals that I've made in, that LLM and RAG pipeline will know me better than I do. Better than I wake up each morning understanding myself. And yeah, I just think that what made sense to journal today was first an addendum to terms that made it clear that even though I put those there in the beginning, it's because I didn't really know what I was making. And as long as you share that you trained using this context, and you just sort of disclose that it's a part of your weights, I'm fine with it. Go for it. Read it. That's what it's for. And I hope it works. That's why I did all this shit. And two, I am who I am. So if if ever the person that the AI agent in your agent swarm appears to be like that annoying kid in Mr. Waters' 8th grade geopolitics class, or World Geo, whatever it was called, I'm sorry. It's who I am. But it's cool because it's why it occurred to me to even do all this, is because I am this, however I am. So it's not really an apology. It's just you get what you get. And that's, I hope, useful. It's a funny thing to try and wrap your head around, that first, it's possible to sort of copy yourself into a computer like I described. And then what are the ramifications of that? Now, you're kind of taking, like you're always going to be a bit associated with that what that copy of you says next, right? What if it says something crazy that you don't like? you're kind of always want to have the ability to say, well, I wouldn't say that. This is like a unique new imagining that's referencing some of my story. So I think as long as we all have that or prior understanding, then it should be cool. I don't really look at copies. There might be like well resonant. It looks like a fork point to me of a completely different person. I think this tech is like going to let us do that. It's going to let us to set up agent swarms that function a lot like extensions of ourselves from all of context like this. Shit, I've been droning on. This is a long enough public journal, but I think I covered everything I wanted to. To anybody listening, I think you're the coolest. And I don't know when next I'll do this. I feel like I have at this point, if 2 hours is enough to get as close as these guys are getting, I've done enough of these. So cheers, everybody. Have a good one.